Georg Elser is on his knees in the Bürgerbräu-Keller, slowly placing dynamite into the hole he has scratched out inside a column. The column supports the roof and is directly located behind the podium where Hitler will be speaking. He's sweating. His hands are scratched, and after he painfully takes the weight off his knees, he turns to the clock mechanism. He sets it. He tests it. It works. Elser has prepared for weeks, secretly carving out the brickwork at night, unseen, and building the mechanism on his own. He wants to stop a dictator from dragging his country into a devastating world war. He slides the wooden panel back into place over the hole. After taking one last look at the swastika-decorated hall, he turns and leaves.
And for Elser was important, he wanted not to kill only Hitler, but all the other highest criminals of the Nazi party, Göring, Goebbels, and Himmler. So, these were the people who were there at the evening of November 8, 1939.
This week I spoke to Professor Johannes Tuchel, the director of the German Resistance Memorial Center, a museum which remembers those Germans who stood up to the Nazis.
Unfortunately, Hitler left the building. There was fog, he cannot use his airplane, so he has to go by train back to Berlin. So he left the building earlier, 13 minutes earlier. And he left the assembly room unexpectedly, only minutes before the explosion. And thus he waited the assassination attempt.
Just 13 minutes. Just think about it, just 13 minutes. If that bomb hit its target, it could have changed history.
Of course, we can't say for sure what would have happened. It's impossible to speculate. But it's tempting to believe that wiping out the entire Nazi high command would have halted their takeover of Europe.
And remember, that was just one man. By himself. Where did he come up with this plan?
Well, to tell that story, we have to go back to the picturesque town of Königsbrunn in Württemberg. This is where Georg Elser grew up. This is where he worked as a carpenter. It seems like an unlikely place to begin. While other assassinations and coup attempts were plotted in cities by networks of conspirators. But it was in Königsbrunn that as war loomed on the horizon, Georg Elser planned and prepared his assassination of Adolf Hitler.
Look at that time. Germany tried to throw away the old Versailles Treaty. In early 1938, the Germans invaded Austria. In the harvest of 1938, they invaded parts of Czechoslovakia, the so-called Sudetenland. And at that time, approximately in October 1938, said Elser, okay, Hitler is a modern tyranny and Hitler is preparing a war, and I'll try to avoid this war by an assassination attempt against Hitler.
How did he know where and when he could try this assassination?
Well, he knows that there's going to be a Nazi speech every year in the same place, in Munich beer hall.
The so-called Bürgerbräu-Keller. Here they made the beer hall putsch in 1923.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of big-name Nazis there, eating and drinking and giving their speeches. It's an ideal place to carry out such an attack.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He knew that this would be his big chance. So he made his preparations. He smuggled dynamite, gunpowder, from a local quarry where he worked. He had some experience as a clockmaker, so he used that in order to build the mechanism which would trigger the bomb. In preparation, he went to his family's secluded orchard. He set up the bomb and tested it.
He got the bomb in place. He left the city. But where could he go?
Well, as soon as he'd set the bomb in place and started the timer, he escaped. He left the city and headed for the border with Switzerland. It might seem a little strange at first, but he was carrying on him a postcard of the Bürgerbräu-Keller and bomb-making paraphernalia, meaning he wanted to be identified.
that was for the purpose to show in Switzerland, yes, I'm the man who made this assassination attempt.
So with these items, he could show that he was instrumental in stopping the war and then ask for asylum in Switzerland.
And it has a second purpose. If someone in Germany was accused to make this assassination attempt, Elser could say from outside, no, this was not this man or this woman, I made this assassination attempt. No one should suffer with false accusation.
So he got to the border of Switzerland. Did he make it through? Did he get away with it?
No. When he got to the border, he was arrested by customs police and put into prison. Of course, from the possessions he had on him, they could work out that he was the person who had planted the bomb. His wife, back in Königsbronn, was also arrested, and Georg was transported to Munich and eventually Berlin for cruel, torturous interrogation. But why did they interrogate him when they already had evidence that he was the person who committed the plot? Professor Tuchel from the German Resistance Memorial Center explains.
The Nazis say there is not the possibility that a simple carpenter could make an assassination attempt against our beloved Führer's life. And the Nazi propaganda said Elser is only a part of a conspiracy. He worked for the British Secret Service. Nonsense. He made sketches of the pillar, he made sketches of the explosive machine, and he built a reconstruction of the explosive machine for the Gestapo.
So he drew up his plans, he reconstructed the bomb and the mechanism, and his interrogators were able to see that he really could build such a device on his own.
I'm sure this type of crime carried the death sentence. After he confessed, was he executed right away?
No, not at first. Georg Elser was kept alive for several years.
Why?
Well, the Nazis had planned to be victorious, of course, in the war, and they decided that once they were victorious, they would put the heads of the Secret Intelligence Service in Britain on trial, and Georg Elser would be their human evidence for this trial. As bombs started falling near the Dachau concentration camp where he was imprisoned, they realized the war was lost, and they wouldn't need to keep their prisoner alive, after all.
The Nazis lost the war, though Adolf Hitler ordered on April 5, 1945, the execution of Elser, what took place 4 days later in the Dachau concentration camp.
His murderers were ordered to report the death of Elser as an accident. He was shot and immediately cremated. How is Georg Elser remembered today?
It was a long way to give a good memory for Georg Elser in Germany. In the Nazi time, a lot of people believed in the Nazi propaganda. Elser was an instrument of the British Secret Service. On the other hand, a lot of people say it's unbelievable. Why had Hitler left for 13 minutes? The Nazis did this for themselves. It needed a long time, up to the year 1969, when the interrogation records of Elser were found by the Munich historian Lothar Gruchmann. From that moment on, all people could know that Elser was acting for himself by his own decision, that he wanted to end the war. But it needed a long time in Germany. The old rumors, the old stereotypes are still working.
As the professor explained, the story of the assassination attempt and the reasons behind it has changed over the years since the Second World War. And that brings us to today. This week, a new film was released to commemorate the 70th anniversary of Georg Elser's murder on the 9th of April 1945. The film is titled hätte die Welt verändert, or He Could Have Changed the World. In English, it will be released later this year under the title 13 Minutes. The director of the film is Oliver Hirschbiegel, and he explains why the story was so important to him.
Back then he was suspected of being a stooge of the British intelligence agency. They thought the bomb was too well constructed to be something he could have made on his own. The other rumor was that he was working for the Nazis to prove that Hitler couldn't be killed.
This is the guy that directed Downfall, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Remember the clip of Elser placing the dynamite and setting the clock mechanism from the beginning of this report? That's a clip from this film.
Then the script landed on my desk with new information about him, telling and showing a story in a different way. I couldn't do anything else except say, I have to make it. I didn't even plan to film anything around that time, but the story was so fascinating that I had to.
Zum letzten Mal, wer sind Ihre Hintermänner?
Gut, dann sag ich's halt. Der Churchill hat mich angerufen und gesagt, Elser, bau eine Bombe und jag den Hitler für mich in die Luft. Wir alleine schaffen das nicht. Ich kann nicht sagen, was es nicht gibt. Ich muss leider zu meiner Schande gestehen.
I have to admit to my shame that I hadn't heard of Georg Elser before I read the book.
Nichts gehört habe.
That's the actor who plays Georg Elser in the film, Christian Friedel.
And
when I read the book, I was fascinated by the story, the courage he shows.
Und der Mut, die Courage.
Then I realized that it's important that this film is made in order to bring him into the collective consciousness.
Bewusstsein zu bringen.
And you know what? Christian's right. It's cultural artifacts such as films and books and exhibitions which keep people who do courageous acts alive in our collective consciousness. During my visit to the German Resistance Memorial Centre, Professor Tuchel showed me around a part of the museum dedicated to the memory of Georg Elser.
So, yeah, if you could just talk for a couple of minutes just about what's here, what we can see.
Okay. We are now in the permanent exhibition of the German Resistance Memorial Center. This is room number 7, and it deals with Georg Elser and the assassination attempt.
One criticism many people bring up is, why didn't more Germans resist the dictatorship? But of course, on the other hand, it was extremely difficult to speak up or act against the Nazi regime when facing the threat of brutal punishment and even execution. But this should bring us even more to respect and remember those who did stand up. The final word goes to Professor Tuchel. He believes that the fact Elser wasn't successful isn't the most significant point. Here's what's important. One man had the courage to resist the Nazi regime and was 13 minutes away from single-handedly changing history.
What he made is so important for the German history because Elser is an example what a man could see, what a man can make his own decision and how he can act against tyranny.